All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Classy's August free webinar with Sue Trautman. We're excited to have such a large and international group with us. I know it's 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. For some of you, so thank you for your dedication. We will be recording the session, so if anyone misses anything or would like to review it again later, you will have that option. We will email out the link a couple days after the session. And also, I just wanted to share with everyone our web address here. We do on our website have links to all of the previous webinars. So please take a chance to visit our website. There's a nice library of resources there available for you. And also, if you're just interested in learning more about sensory integration or earning your certificate in sensory integration, or if you already have a certificate and want to refresh and renew, please visit our website at classy.org to learn how to do that. So tonight we're excited to have Sue Trautman here for her third session of her series. And I'm excited to introduce Sue for those of you joining for the first time. Sue has had a passion for sensory integration throughout her entire career and has been highly invested in teaching others throughout the world about sensory integration theory, assessment, and intervention. She is closely involved with the AIRS Sensory Integration 2020 vision, assisting with the development of the EASY test materials, coordination of field and pilot testing of the EASY, and she is also an instructor with Classy. Sue founded and worked until 2018 at the Center for Developing Kids in Pasadena, California. And we're excited to have Sue here for a series of 6 of these webinars. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Sue, and everyone.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Is my sound okay because I adjusted my microphone?
You sound good to me. If anyone has any issues hearing Sue, please go ahead and type in the chat box and let us know.
Okay, I'm turning it up a little bit. Okay, well, gosh, this is so exciting, watching everybody coming on from all the different countries, and as I said last time, what a fun and wonderful way to learn together. I am so happy to be here. This is the third, as Katie said, in a series of 6 webinars, and these are the webinars that are coming up. And the first 2 webinars covered perception using AIR's original model that indicated the importance of sensory perception as the foundation for skill and praxis. And then we used SIP bar graphs, some easy information, and the interpretation tool to illustrate the well-established patterns developed through the years of research that support AIR's model. So today, what I'm going to do is talk about perception and reactivity. And the way that the webinars have typically been going is that I will talk for about a half an hour, and then we will have time for questions. And as Katie mentioned, you can either type it in the chat box or you can raise your hand to use a microphone, and hopefully we'll get to questions that way at the end of the presentation. Also, last time there were a number of questions that came up when we had time for discussion about things that people might like to hear about, and I will also try and address some of those questions after the first set of questions and discussion. Okay? Are you guys sounding, it's a little too loud maybe you're saying? Is that better, Gretchen? Huh. You know what, I'm going to change out to a different microphone just in case, and let's see if that helps. Okay, now I'm on a different mic, and is this a little bit better? Okay, I don't know if I can get much better than this. All right, let's go, she says. Cindy says, let's go, and we're going to go. Okay, so let's see. So if you want to go back to the other webinars, this one builds on it just a little bit, but it still should be fine on its own. And in this instance, we are defining perception as the ability or how we see, hear, feel, become aware of movement and body position through the senses, as measured by the SIPT, observed through EASY, and other clinical observations. And then we're using the term reactivity versus modulation for the purposes of our discussion because reactivity is the term used in the DSM-5, and we're really looking at it as a measure of sensory modulation, somewhat related to the intensity of a reaction to the context in more of a general term. And we can get into a little bit more detail as we go through this webinar. Okay? But let's talk first about what matters. And just in general, thinking about the child coming to you to be assessed, what matters, I think, to a parent is that they have a great responsibility to guide their child towards emotional and physical competence, and they just want them to participate successfully across many, many environments. And I think that the child, their job or their occupation is to explore and to learn comfortably, and I really believe that they always are trying, or most often are trying to please others. They are learning from a very young age how to follow rules, and they're continually trying to figure out what to do to fit in. That's part of their job. And even when they're having challenging behavior, so to speak, I think that really the ultimate goal is that they want to please and be a part of a relationship. The therapist, my guess is that most of you are here because the bottom line is that you want to do really good intervention. And that you cannot do unless you really understand the problem, and so I'm just guessing that that's why you're here today, because you want to learn more so that in the end you're out there doing the right thing. Now the teacher, I would say that the teacher wants the child to learn. That's their key goal. But they also want that child to blend in. They want that child to just fit in with the rest of the kids so that they can reach their goal of really teaching that child. And then if you think about the profession, as a professional, we want to make our professions proud, right? We want to be competent, we want to make sure we're doing evidence-based practice, and we want to be capable of explanation. We want to be capable of explaining why we're doing what we're doing, and then we want to go out there and do excellent intervention, okay? So, how do we get there? Because what I just talked about, there's a lot of investment by a lot of people in this process. And I don't know about you, but I certainly feel an enormous responsibility when I am working with a child to meet expectations. And again, I think that's why you're here, many of you have gone to the Class C courses. And these courses, these webinars rather, have been set up to support modules, particularly 3, 4, and 5, But there's a lot of people who have been on Module 1 or Module 6 who are also here, and I'm so glad that we're all together. It really makes a difference. So we're here because we want to meet this enormous responsibility. And so let's look at this a little more. Why is it that some children are really comfortable and enjoy certain sensations, and others find it really scary or annoying or frustrating? Loves this experience of eating food, whereas another looks quite sad and avoidant and doesn't want to enjoy this experience. It involves many senses, including smell, taste, texture, a lot of different senses. And then there's the children who are very comfortable with touch, and then there's those who it literally provokes anxiety and aggression. So what is it? Why are they doing this? And we're going to use assessment, of course, to figure this out, but we're going to talk a little bit about the importance. So just to get set the stage to get you thinking, I found this little picture when I was looking on Google for images for just some pictures related to kind of regulation, and this really resonated with me because this is exactly what I would do if I was lost. I would turn down the radio. Now, I don't really know why this penguin's in this picture, but I like the saying, I like the colors, so there he is. But in any event, imagine yourself, and you're driving along the highway, or driving along, and you've got the windows rolled down in the car, and you have the radio on, and you're happy. You maybe have a bunch of papers on the seat next to you, and everything's going fine, and all of a sudden, you're lost. What would you do? Well, what I would do is I would turn down the radio. I'd actually turn it off. But I don't have any problem with my hearing. But I turned off the radio. I got rid of that sensory input. I also might pull over, roll up the windows. I might roll up the windows, but I don't have any problem with the wind blowing on me. But what sometimes happens is that you may have to reduce the stimulus to one or more sensory systems to allow for executive function. And trouble managing sensation is experienced by everyone when you're tired, you're sick, or you're stressed. Just think about yourself when you're sick. You probably want to have the lights down a little bit lower, you want it a little bit quieter. So it's not that you have a problem with that particular sense, it's that you need to manage your sensory input to allow for participation. And I think a lot of times the children that we work with are in the same situation where so maybe a child is closing off his ears, holding his ears and shutting out sensation, or maybe they are touching everything or pushing everybody away or doing something related to touch in order to manage or modulate or not over or underreact to certain sensation. And it may not be because they have perception problems. It may be just reactivity, and so we have to figure this out. Another example, a child standing in line lashes out when touched unexpectedly from in front of this child or behind, okay? So this has happened to me when I've been at a school. I've done a lot of work at schools, and the teacher or even another OT will say, oh, well, they're tactile defensive. So what does that mean? It's like, what do you mean? I mean, maybe this child has such good touch perception accuracy that when he was touched or she was touched, all of a sudden she was so alert and so aware that she lashed out and pushed the child in front of her. Or maybe the touch perception of the child is so poor that when they were touched by another child, they didn't understand fully that touch and they felt threatened and pushed that child. Or perhaps it could even be that it's neither of those, that the child just had a really bad night of sleep, they don't feel good, there's something going on at home, and it has absolutely nothing to do with their touch perception. Now, this is really important because we treat this a little bit differently. But just before getting into that a little bit more specifically, you wonder why, what's going on with sensory modulation? Why, or reactivity? Why is this child reactive? So I want to know as an OT if they truly do have perception problems, which the SIPT or other good assessments will help me know, or is it the reactivity? And unfortunately, there's really unknown etiology for reactivity, but Diane Parham mentions that she says that it's likely that sensory modulation or reactivity involves complex interplays among threshold levels, orienting responses, habituation, sensitization, affective responses, and learning. So we can't see it, but we can see the child's responses. And this has always been a real mystery to me because you just really want to know because you can't see it, but there can be, there could be involvement at a lot of different neurologic levels, maybe the limbic system, maybe the amygdala, but I don't really know why, but I do have some thoughts on what helps once I've done an assessment. Okay. So if we want to meet your goal and responsibility of being here at this webinar and going back and doing good intervention, assessment is the foundation that will guide us. If the reason for that child pushing the person in front of her or him ends up being touch perception, we can work directly at that level. So we could do a lot of tactile activities, and we would probably do them in a sensory integrative framework because we know that multisensory input tends to be more effective, and it's a really good way to treat perception problems. But if the problem is reactivity, maybe we have to really think about what sensory input we are going to use. And let's say the child that has been identified as, quote, tactile defensive, you test that child and you find out that their perception is fine. We still want to help that child function. We want to help them with strategies, and we want to help them practice in a way managing multi-sensory input without reactions that are not correct, I guess, or not helpful to the context. So, for example, a child whose problem was identified as not perception but reactivity, I might use more proprioception. I've also found that tactile activities at midline are very helpful. So if I'm working with a child and I'm doing a lot of vestibular proprioceptive input, perhaps in a sensory integrative framework, and I might be in a smaller room. If this is a child who has a lot of reactivity problems, I might be in a quieter room. I often just find it really helpful to have therapy putty available for transitions in, for transitions out, and I just, I don't have any evidence for this little idea about tactile in between, but the tactile and midline, I've just found that's helpful. Okay, so now we look at our interpretation tool, and we've focused in the past on perception. And is the problem sensory perception related to vestibular, proprioception, tactile, or visual, and resulting in any of these problems such as visual or somatodyspraxia, bilateral integration and sequencing, or postural and motor functions? Or is it reactivity? Now, the tools that we tend to use for reactivity at this point are usually questionnaires, the sensory processing measure, the sensory profile, and we might find it is not unusual to have a child referred who has problems on the SPM or the SP, and then I test them with the SIPT, and the SIPT is typical. If that is the case, then I can say, wow, that's great. I know the child has typical perception, and now I know the problem is reactivity, and we need to work as a team to help manage those situations that cause the child to overreact or underreact, and we start working at a different level. With that said, it's pretty common to have both, or a little bit of both. But I've seen it both ways. So in the event that you do have both, then we're going to have to work through that based on your assessment. So let's look at a few bar graphs. First we're going to talk just on the profiles. Reactivity, often the statements start like bothered by, easily distracted by, etc. It doesn't mean that this isn't a perception problem. Again, we have to do good standardized testing, but you might see some of these lead-ins to the questions. When you have these lead-ins, such as trouble paying attention, etc., prefers, refuses, we really don't know. Just like that child standing in line who everyone told me, oh, this child's tactile defensive. I want to know why, because I feel like I can't really be helpful unless I have that answer. So, oops, I think I went the wrong way. Hang on. Okay. So again, assessment for treatment. Here's a child that, if you can read the description. He's being asked to leave 2 preschools, and the SIPT bar graph is showing us pretty clearly that we have 3 tactile scores: finger identification, graphesthesia, and localization of tactile stimuli that are low. So, this is a situation where I would say, okay, the explanation of what his challenges are seem to be that he has perhaps both touch perception and some reactivity going on, but I really now want to know, because I'm a little bit intrigued that all of his other scores are so well within average. So this is when you really have to add in all of your other information, and you might do kind of a multisensory approach here, of course, where you do both all the things you would do for regulation and reactivity as you would for perception. Sometimes you see something that's really, to me there's 2 scores here that are interesting in particular, or perhaps suspicious. Just like you might have a low tactile score, you might also have a high tactile score, like that child in line who is so aware when they're touched, and so they get touched and they're really, really accurate, and boom, it becomes threatening. Also, if you recall, the localization of tactile stimuli test is the last one of the SIP that's given, and by then, sometimes the children are really, really in tune and may have a really high score like this. But there's no other low scores that, or high scores that support it in the same way, and then except you have a low standing and walking balance score, which is in a completely different area. So that makes you wonder if in fact this might be reactivity. It's clearly not a touch perception problem, but I'd want to look more at the balance. Here's another example. When I see something that's really kind of, again, so many average scores, and you see one low tactile score, one low praxis score, one low proprioceptive vestibular score, it makes me wonder about what's going on. And as I've mentioned before, it's really helpful if you have your manual, your SIP manual, and you can go to page 134 or 189, where each test is explained separately and gives you a wealth of information about what might be going on. So sometimes I just have to really look at the test specifically itself. But this is, to me, a kind of a classic case that often ends up being a reactivity problem. And here's another one. Again, you just have finger identification and space visualization. They don't have a lot of relationship to each other, such as we had discussed in the first, I think it was the first webinar where I really talked about relationships. Okay? All right. So now what I'd like to do is show you a little video, and it's about 3 or 4 minutes long, and this is a therapist who is working with a child who does have reactivity concerns, and she has just a nice way of giving the child time and supporting her with the intervention. And so I just wanted to show you this clip. So go ahead, Katie.
I want to make something.
You do? What do you want to make?
I don't know. You choose. But it can't be something boring.
Can't be something. Alright, well, I'm going to need your help because you always come up with really exciting, fun things to make. How about this? If you wait inside here, I'll come up with a good idea, okay? What do you think? Let me think. I wonder what Kyle's going to want to do. I'm not sure. Wait a second. Did Kyle disappear? What? Let me see. What's in here? Oh no. Oh my goodness, the bed's alive. What do I do? It's gonna get me. Oh no. The bed is moving. What do I do? Maybe if I squish it down, it'll sink back into the sheets. This is the silliest bed I've ever seen. Maybe there's bed bugs in there. Whoa! That was a really fast bed bug.
Now did you figure out?
I have to tell you something. While you were gone, there were giant bed bugs in here.
No, it wasn't.
And they were flipping around in circles.
No, that was me.
That was you the whole time? Oh, I thought they were giant bed bugs. I'm glad it was you. I'm afraid if you leave again, the bed bugs are gonna come back. Okay, oh, you're back.
Now have you figured out?
Yes. Why don't we make a Batman guy for you? Should we make another Batman? Since we got all the bad guys today? Or we can make Robin. We didn't need Robin.
I want to make all the superheroes you can figure out.
All the superheroes? How should we go all the way to the back of OT? Should we sneak on our tummies like a bad guy? Or should we hop like a bunny?
Actually, bear.
A bear walk. Okay, you ready? Get set. Go! Wait a second! Hold on! There you go. I said, wait a second, bears can walk? Good work, little bear.
Okay, so I hope you agree with me that that was a beautiful little session, and if you've been involved with Fidelity, you can see that there is a safe environment, that the therapist certainly had a relationship with the child. She beautifully blended in play without getting really too physically involved with the child. The child was able to provide a lot of her own input. And I love the way that she kind of put together the reality, the bed bug talk. And it was just really cute, too. So I just wanted to show you how a nice clip of working with a child with reactivity issues. I thought that was really, really great. So I'm grateful to the therapist. Okay, so basically, with AIR's sensory integration being the ability to organize sensory information for use, this involves a number of things. First of all, just going to the end of 2 words, for use, we're really talking about praxis. We're talking about knowing what to do as well as how to do it. So again, if we were to go back to AIR's original model, which I've shown in other webinars, you've got the sensory systems on one side, and there's a lot of end products in the middle, and you end up with skill that requires praxis. So perception gives us the information to organize the sensory information. So it gives us the opportunity to organize the sensory information. And then we adjust our reaction to the context of the situation. So what that really means is that is it perception or reactivity? Probably it's usually both. I mean, certainly you have perception and reactivity. You're always reacting. But it's when your perception or your reactivity interfere with your participation. That's when we worry. And if there's one that's interfering more than the other, then, or even just one that's interfering, then we really want to work on that. So, going back to the parent, the child, the teacher, our profession, ourselves, if we can do an assessment, we still may not have all the answers, but we will certainly be, oops, sorry, I just messed my computer up here. We will certainly be we'll be on a better path to understanding what we're doing, why we're doing it, so we don't let any of those people down, the child, the parent, ourselves, the community, the profession. So hopefully this clarified for you what perception and reactivity are, at least at the foundation level, and certainly if you want to look more into it, you can do that as well later. Okay? All right, so I am going to first show you that as I mentioned, we'll have some questions about this, and then I have some other answers to some of the questions that were posed last time. There were 3 or 4 of them. Before we get to that, I do want to show you my email. You're welcome to email me, and I'm happy to answer questions or talk to you about what I know by email. But anyway, so let's start looking at, let's start talking about some questions. Let's see if anyone has any questions or comments. We have a wealth of opportunity in this room, a wealth of opportunity for a wealth of experience and opportunity in this room, which is pretty exciting. Was this helpful? At least I'd like to know that, if you feel like it's been cleared up a little bit. Okay. I'm just waiting for the questions to come in here. Oh, good. I'm glad it was helpful, Amy. Okay, Cindy is saying it was helpful, but we can't always do an assessment other than the SP or SPM. I don't know why that is, Cindy. There are many other assessments out there that would give you information about perception, and if you've been involved in these courses, you could, if you suspected it was touch perception, you could at least do a few of the SIPT, the touch tests, for an example. And then Amy, hopefully that's helpful, Cindy. And Amy's asking my preference of SPM or sensory profile. You know, I like them both. I tend to use the SPM only because it's shorter. I know that's probably not a good reason, but I always feel like parents and teachers are so busy, and it seems a little less overwhelming to give them just one, something that's a little bit shorter. Okay. Pamela says, in autistic children, do you think the two are mixed? Just a minute. Where did I lost you, Pamela? So it's important to teach the parents and the teachers the difference. I think, yes, if you do an assessment, you can explain it somewhat like I just did. I mean, it took a half an hour, so it'd take you less because you wouldn't have all of this involved. And it certainly would, because then you would do that naturally through your instruction as far as going through your report. And actually, the next webinar, we are going to be talking about what we would say to parents and teachers and how about teaching them about these things. Okay. And then Joyce is saying, can you clarify tactile activities at midline? You know, they just happen to be at midline because tactile activities, well, are not always at midline, but one of my favorite activities is using therapy putty with little pegs or something in it. And when the child is kind of starting to fall apart, or they're transitioning usually out of the clinic because they don't want to leave, I would use something like therapy putty, which just their hands are at midline. I don't really know if it's the midline piece or if it's the tactile piece. I would use that, for example, over painting, which would be a little bit wilder, and I never, ever, ever would have a child go in the ball pit when they didn't want to leave, because I'm sure many of you have been there where you can't get the kids out of the ball pit once they're in. So it's just something I noticed. Okay, thank you, Donna, about the idea of managing, how we naturally reduce our sensory system input. And, yeah, it was fun for me to see that little penguin on the image on Google, because I've thought about that a lot. Okay. Yeah, and I have used that example, Donna, to talk to parents about this. Where you find the previous webinars, Gretchen, is on the Classy website, I think. But Katie, if you're listening, can you clarify that? Oh, there she goes. There's Marco and Katie giving you the website. Okay. Anna Marie says the video clip was great in demonstrating how a child modulates and then are ready to engage in activity. Yes, requiring more discriminatory abilities. Thank you, Anna Marie. Thank you, and hello. Okay, Carol, will the SPM be expanded to past age 12? I don't know the answer to that. Does anyone else know that? Richard, you might know. Marco, yes. Okay. 90, oh, that's right, 90 years old. Okay. I don't know why not 100, but okay. Okay, Christy is saying, do you think between the info you get from the SIPT and the SPM, SP, you usually get enough to tease whether the challenges are perception or reactivity? Absolutely. Absolutely, if you do the SIPT, because the SIPT is perception. The SIPT doesn't really measure reactivity, although you can observe it, but the SIPT is really looking at that external input and is comparing the child to other children. And I can't stress enough how important assessment is. I'm going to give one quick little example. I had a therapist who did some of the tactile tests that I was working with, and she was writing the report, and she mentioned that the child had a problem in touch perception. And I asked her to see the test scores, the actual test scores that were scored, the SIPT test scores. And she said, oh, well, I didn't score it. I just noticed that he missed a lot of the items. Well, we can't do that. Because, in fact, I said, well, let's score it. We have to score this test and find out. And we scored the test, and sure enough, it was typical for his age to have missed many items. So it's just really critical that you're comparing your child to a normative sample of typical kids. So, okay, you can tell I'm passionate about that one. But anyway, okay, I'll listen to your questions now some more. Okay, how would I assess kids who aren't qualified for SIPT as well as kids below 4? Well, the good thing, Dee, is that the easy is going to go down to 3. And again, I'd have to just really, without other good assessment tools for perception, I would have to use all my knowledge that I've gained through really studying sensory integration, and I would have to just tease it out the best I could without clear, tight assessment data. The EASY, which is expected to be out in July, at least we're hoping by then, will have more, should have some normative data, and we should be able to compare some children, get more information on reactivity and perception, and have the age range from 3 to 12. Okay. Hi, Richard. He says the video is a nice sample of how important it is to work at the level of regulation before we can expect active engagement and participation. And yes, and I think Anne-Marie was alluding to that as well. You know, that's a little bit of a treatment strategy, is starting where the child is at. Sometimes kids will come in really excited and really wild, and therapists will try and get them to do something really quiet, and when in fact sometimes it's best to get them doing something pretty crazy and wild, like big swinging, for example. Just an idea. Okay, like the real example. Fadi, have a question about useful strategies about kids who are craving odd smells. Oh boy. I guess I'd have to do more full assessment, I'm thinking, and I don't really know the answer to that other than doing sensory integrative intervention and doing a complete assessment and getting more information. I don't have a great answer for that one. Anybody else? Feel free to answer, Fadi. Oh, how long? Okay, so that's another great question. How long would I typically treat a child with reactivity issues? Okay, this kind of goes again into my next webinar. I would treat a child with reactivity issues as long as I was helping that child, as long as everybody on the team was helping that child, be comfortable and participate. As long as the goals of all those people that I said what matters to are being met, and so it involves a lot of conversation with those people. My treatment has varied from a few months to 12 years for children. So I can't really. It's about a lot of different things and whether they're progressing. Okay, a couple more questions, or I'll go into the other ones that were asked last week. Okay, maybe we're ready for the other ones. And then maybe you'll have questions about those. Okay, so one of the questions, what happened is I asked last time if anybody had anything else that they would like to discuss or look into, and again I asked all of you to weigh in. I asked you to send me information if in fact you had information you thought would be useful to share, but I didn't get any, so I'm going to just do my best to address these topics. The first one was related to voice modulation and kids talking excessively. The answer to that is that you would want to do a full assessment. Again, I would want to know if there were any other perception or reactivity modulation problems, and I would probably talk to a speech therapist because they really tend to be helpful in ruling out things. They look at breath force, a lot of different things, modulation, anxiety, reactivity, and other sensory systems. And I have seen children who have voice modulation concerns do improve with help from the speech therapist and with help of overall sensory integration, I guess you would say, and also using strategies such as reminders. So that's how I have dealt with that one. And then there's another, that's what I can give you. Then another question was about trauma and prenatal exposure, and it seems like this may be related to Stephen Porges' work. I'm not up on the literature at all with that. However, many, many years ago, I worked on the neonatal intensive care unit, and my work partner and I, the other therapists in the unit, we were starting to get a lot of children who were exposed to cocaine, and that was the drug at the time that was really out there. And believe it or not, even we and other people were not really doing sensory strategies or sensory input on the neonatal unit at that time. We were primarily feeding, and Ann Hyde and I wrote this little article called, I think it was called, is there a connection between drug-exposed infants and sensory strategies used on the NICU? That's how big it was. We actually wrote an article that people didn't do it. And we found that those children who had not had any other input, such as they hadn't had speech therapy, they hadn't had, they weren't in education yet. They were simply little infants, and we started doing sensory strategies and education with families at that time in the neonatal intensive care unit, and the difference we saw in these babies was remarkable. And that's when I became probably the strongest believer in sensory integration, because there was nothing new except what we were doing. So that is all I have for that. Again, if anybody has any information, please put up a website, please let people know. And then the last question was about the vestibular system related to reading and other academic functions. So we can ask ourselves, why did Dr. Ayers investigate the link between vestibular and academic learning in her early work, which she did? Because she suspected that there were relationships, but in the early work, again, she didn't really know. I mean, she was motivated to go into this area of sensory integration, because she herself had challenges with learning and academic functions. I don't know about academic functions, but I know she struggled with some of the things that a lot of the children that we work with today do. So what we know is, through all these years of research and all of the studies that have occurred since then, we now know that a lot of the relationships that she uncovered do have an impact on academic functions and reading. So an example is ocular control. We see this with the vestibular nystagmus and PRN, and children looking up at the board and down at their paper. We see problems with this, and we see improvement when we get some of these vestibular areas under control. Postural control, obviously everybody tries to get, kids' feet on the ground and whatever, but if a child is sitting in their seat and is comfortable, even if they're sitting on their legs, I don't really care if that's how their body supports their ability to write and to function. And we also know Dr. Ayers looked at spatial awareness and organization, such as through some of the SIPT tests, and of course those ended up being really important to, just putting things on a shelf, finding toys in a toy bin, organizing your work, being able to do those math problems up and down. There's laterality, there's bilateral integration. We know that bilateral integration and level of alertness is related to vestibular function. So, the vestibular system it just really is powerful and has an impact. And the simplest definition of vestibular is really, one of the simplest definitions is the relationship of your head to gravity and movement. So every time your head moves, you're impacting the vestibular system. So those were the three questions. That's what I've got, and anybody else is free to add some more. We have just about 6 minutes left, so weigh in if you want to. You are welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I love seeing all of you. It's just really exciting to be here together in this way. It's wonderful. Carol Rankin is saying, just thinking of vestibular strategies for classrooms Oh, teachers implement. Do I have favorites I recommend? You know, the simplest is a movement break, but it depends on what the vestibular problem is, of course. Again, you have to go back to this, you know, the assessment of what the actual problem is. And then I try and work with the teachers. And so next week, now I'm not going to do the next webinar till I think it's the end of September. So that time we'll put our heads together and talk about how to share this with parents and teachers. Okay. Anything else? All right. I think we're done. Thank you everybody for coming. Despite the time differences, and I look forward to, I see all these people. So fun to see everyone's names again. Okay. I just really look forward to seeing you guys again, or hearing and working with you again on the next webinar. So good night, everybody, or good morning. Bye-bye.
And just while everyone's still in the room, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that they are invited to attend the 2020 International Sensory Integration Congress and Dr. Ayers Centennial Celebration with Classy in Redondo Beach, California, next July from July 15th to 18th, 2020. It's going to be a great event with the entire global SI community. And right now we have a special offer. If you reserve your place for ISIC 2020 by making a deposit registration, seat will be guaranteed, and you will also receive as a gift a print of one of Dr. Ayers' watercolor artworks, and we will be delivering those to everyone at the conference. So please save your spot. We hope all of you can join us. It's definitely going to be an event not to be missed. And Marco just put a link directly to the registration page in the chat box. So if you haven't already reserved your spot, please do so, and we hope to see you all. So thank you again, Sue, and until the next webinar.